Now, what happens here? If we have a smooth, polished edge and we're cutting on the cutting board, we have to put some kind of a pressure on the knife. We have to put a force on the knife. If we have a smooth, polished edge, that force is distributed along the whole edge. And if it's smooth and polished, it's quite strong and it'll glide easily like an ice skate on an ice rink, quite easily along the board. If we go to the other extreme and we make it very toothy, if it looks something like this, if that was my knife edge, and I put that into the board, you can see where it would feel like a saw, and it would actually cut into the wood, and it would want to bite and stick into the wood. And we want the knife to glide. We don't want it to bite into the wood. We want it to glide along the surface comfortably. The other thing about it is that if we put the same force or pressure on this knife edge, which are all the teeth, that pressure is distributed over these teeth. Now this one wouldn't even see the cutting board. So it's just the teeth that encounter the board. Suddenly these teeth become very susceptible to either bending over or getting torn off by the wood, by the board. So this is an aggressive edge and it cuts the surface of the food quite readily, but it leaves a ragged surface. And the Japanese talk about how you can actually taste the difference in the food between a polished edge and one that's quite rough like this. This is an exaggerated drawing for sure. But this toothy edge is going to really kind of saw through all the cellular structure of the food. So imagine if I cut through an apple, I'm sawing through all that cellular structure, and we're going to get a lot more juice that's released, and the apple juice tends to oxidize when it hits the air, and when apple juice oxidizes, it turns brown. So if you cut food that actually oxidized, like an apple, and you cut it with a saw blade edge, they tend to turn brown much quicker. Whereas if you cut that same food, that same apple, with a nice polished razor blade edge, you're tearing a lot less of the cell structure. Therefore, you're releasing less apple juice. Therefore, the food tends not to oxidize or turn brown as quickly. So that's the other advantage. Not only will it last longer, glide on the board better, but it's friendlier to the food, and some people say they can actually taste the difference in the food. So that's my goal, is to go for a smooth, polished edge. And over time, as that knife edge gets used, hits the cutting board, becomes deformed, I decide to use my hone. That will straighten it back out. Then I go back to cutting for a while until the performance drops because the edge has come out of alignment. Then I use my hone again to straighten it out. Over time, some of the edge will become fatigued or parts of it will break out, and the performance will begin to drop where suddenly, or not suddenly, but over time, the hone is no longer as effective as it once was. And so now I'm out of the honing zone and I get to the stoning zone. And I actually have to stop and resharpen my knife with some stones and recreate an edge, recreate the geometry firstly, and then polish the geometry on both sides so that I get back to my push cut, my shaving cut, and then I start the cycle over again. And that life cycle of the edge of your knife is relative to the quality of the steel, the quality of your technique of just barely cutting through the food and not crashing into the board, the quality of the board, how rough or how hard is this, and how hard are you rubbing the knife on the board, where you store the knife. Did you just throw it in a drawer with a bunch of other tools, or did you throw it in the sink? And so all of those things add up to give you a cutting experience. And so the more you can pay attention to where you store your knife, what you cut on, what your cutting technique is like, and the quality of your knife and how often you hone will all add up to either a great cutting experience or something less than that. So now I'm going to show you how to use the hone.